Chapter 23 Revolution. Hawk stood in the center of the room, staring balefully at the three men seated in hardwood chairs against the wall. All the other furniture in the room had been shunted aside, leaving a clearing where Hawk stood. Rooster, Danny, and Crossley waited sullenly for whatever came next. "All right," Hawk finally declared. "Let's get this over with. Rooster, you're up." Rooster got up and walked to the middle of the room. He stopped in front of Hawk and took a deep breath. Hawk gave a quick nod, and Rooster threw a vicious right hook that caught him just above the temple. Hawk rocked backward, but quickly righted himself. He rubbed the side of his head and knew that it would swell later. Rooster turned around and walked back to his seat. Danny dismissively waved his hand when Hawk called him up. "Forget it," he said. Hawk shook his head. Danny knew he had to do it. It would be an insult not to. The punch Danny delivered had been harder than he'd intended. He was tempted to apologize, but didn't. Hawk took it better than expected. He was glad he hadn't been knocked out. Nobody listens to a man they just knocked out. He turned to Crossley. "What you got, son?" Crossley was the biggest threat of the bunch. He stood a sturdy 6'1" and weighed a hefty 220. If anybody was going to put him down, it would be this guy. He had mixed feelings when Crossley didn't get up, but instead slouched back in his chair. "Fuck you, nigga. Excuse me." Now Crossley stood up. His chest swelled and his fists balled up into meaty ham hocks. "Fuck you, nigga, sir!" "That's better." From his vantage point in another corner of the room, Governor Booker spoke up. "All right, gentlemen. Now that we've gotten our pound of flesh, can we address the remainder of our business?" In fact, the first order of business had already been accomplished. The regular guard was now deployed in Greenspoint. As soon as the guard had deployed, a member of the California federal delegation to Corpus Christi had been selected to propose an amendment to the UCC Constitution allowing the state of California to withdraw from the church. The amendment granting California its independence needed to be approved by 2/3 of the delegates to a United Congregations Convention. It also needed to be approved by 2/3 of the House of Shepherds and 2/3 of the Church High Council. If the amendment passed, it would be sent to all churches' deacon boards for consideration. Next, it would need to be accepted by at least 38 of the 50 church bodies to be adopted. To protect itself from time-consuming legal challenges, California included a caveat. At its own discretion, at a time to be determined, California reserved the right to act as if the amendment had been adopted and declare itself a sovereign nation. To wit, the Democratic Socialist Republic of California. The rebels staked their immediate safety on the premise that upper room concerns over international optics would prevent them from mounting an unmediated military response. Political and racial uncertainties throughout the armed forces would also serve to slow any hasty countermeasures. So it was that the state of California, fearing for the security of its economy and the liberty of its denizens, prepared to leave the Union. These were the circumstances when Hawk and the governor of California sat down with the gangsters of Camp Brown. The entire plan was ludicrous as far as Rooster was concerned. He wanted to know why the governor would throw in with them under any circumstances. Booker explained that the present course of action wasn't anything he'd wanted or looked forward to. "Don't misunderstand," he'd said. "This may very well be the very last thing I ever do. But, corny as it may sound, I believe in the principles set forward in the U.S. Constitution." Rooster countered that the Constitution was a non-factor when it came to people of color, a point to which Booker'd acquiesced, but maintained. "We're in a different situation now. Should we live to see it, the new Constitution will reflect the ideals of the founders of the new nation." Danny wanted to know what prevented Hawk from seizing total power if they were actually successful. Booker admitted he couldn't guarantee anything. "I judge a man by my sense of his integrity. That's all I can go by. Lieutenant Colonel Hawkins doesn't strike me as a man who's out for himself." Booker was keen to the fact that times had changed. The old days, when the notion of white supremacy went unchallenged, were finished, and despite any and all efforts to the contrary, there was nothing to be done for it. "Because I can see no peaceful resolution to the troubles we find ourselves in, I and others of like mind have elected to be proactive in our efforts to preserve the ideals of Western democracy. In the questionable event that we're successful in this endeavor, majority rule would be the outcome we'd expect. That brings us to you. Again, should we prevail, to the victor go the spoils. Those of us in the present majority who hereinafter throw in with you expect to have a seat at the table. Not the head of the table, but we still bring a lot. So, Hawk wasn't interested in divvying up any spoils. Y'all counting chickens? That horse way out in front of the car. Our first move better be keeping those boys from nuking us. We've got to leave them a way out. Otherwise, they're definitely turning the beaches to glass. Booker pronounced the only way to stop them would be to take away their will and or ability to respond. When Rooster asked how they planned to do that, Booker repeated the question back to him. We have to figure this out together. Thanks to the efforts of men like Lieutenant Colonel Hawkins and others, we enjoy considerable support within every branch of the armed forces, all ranks, all races. At the moment, we're so deeply under the radar that even we don't know what our numbers are. What about intelligence, Danny asked. What are we looking like? Hawk cut in. That's tricky. Coordinating between agencies at this point is non-existent. We know we have support, but differing branches and agencies have no central system of cross-communication. They don't know who each other are. So there's no one in charge. It's safest to assume we need to establish a network of our own. Booker said. To date, we've not seen any signs of breach. This isn't a condition we expect will last. At present, we have access to all the considerable conventional resources of UCC military. Ironically, inmates, your participation in the effort to forestall this assault on democracy is paramount. It's now or never. Surreal as it may seem, gentlemen, when you look around this room, you're looking at the last best hope for the survival of the Western democracy as we know it in our lifetime. The gravity of the statement wasn't fully appreciated by anybody in the room. Everyone knew the odds were long. The thing was, as far as blacks and browns were concerned, there wasn't any other viable option. The way things stacked up, they were damned if they did, damned if they didn't. To this end, Danny had the prescience to amass a matrix of extraordinarily talented geeks. Utilizing his Austin connections, along with coders he'd recruited from his Stratford days, he'd culled together a formidable network of nerds. His people were savants at circumventing complex security systems and weaponizing code. While that was all well and good, Rooster wanted to know an answer to a very simple question. What you gonna do about all them white boys in the military? He found Hawk's response less than satisfactory. Call off the strike. Get your people to cooperate. I'll take care of my end. Booker grabbed Hawk's hand and prepared to leave. Hold on to your hat, Hawkins. Seeking reassurance as much as offering it, Hawk replied, We're doing the right thing. The remark elicited an upside-down smile from Booker. Right or wrong? Then, with a wink that struck Hawk more as whistling past the graveyard than confidence, the governor left. After watching what he believed to be Hawk's successful handling of the camp uprising, Kellogg returned to Corpus Christi with assurances for the president. At the very moment Kellogg was briefing Everhart, Hawk was sending volunteers into the Los Padres National Forest to find the escapees. On the day of the break, the escapees had found themselves barreling pell-mell toward oblivion. No one knew what was coming next, but everybody knew nothing good was waiting at the end of the line. After forcing the engineer to stop the train, the inmates unloaded the supplies that had been intended to sustain them in the fields. When they were done, they wedged a toolbox atop the dead man's switch and set the locomotive on its way. There was a debate about whether or not to kill the engineer. The practical argument prevailed, and more than 300 men vanished into the woods. The train had derailed just northwest of New Guayama, about 75 miles from the camp. Since no inmates' bodies had been recovered at the crash site, Hawk knew the escapees were out there somewhere. To prevent anyone else from looking for them, he'd issued a statement declaring that the crash had been a runaway train, and all the inmates were present and accounted for.